Imagine you win your freedom. You fight for it. You bleed for it. You win. And then, 21 years later, a fleet of warships sails into your harbor and hands you a bill for your freedom. This is the true story of how the richest place in the world was turned into one of the poorest countries on earth, not by accident, but by a single signature signed under the guns. To understand the trap, you have to see what was at stake first. In the 1700s, there was an island colony called Saint-Domingue. France owned it, and it was a machine for making money. The sugar, the coffee, a huge share of what the whole world drank and ate came from this one small place. But where did all that wealth come from? It came from horror. Hundreds of thousands of enslaved people worked to death on the plantations, replaced, and worked to death again. This was the richest colony in the Americas, and it was built on the worst cruelty of its age. Then, in 1791, the enslaved rose up. Not a riot, a revolution. They fought the plantation owners. They fought the French. They even fought the army that Napoleon himself sent across the ocean to crush them and put them back in chains. And they beat them. In 1804, they declared themselves free, a new nation, the first in the world built by people who had freed themselves from slavery. They called it Haiti. Think about that for a second. An enslaved people defeated one of the most powerful empires on earth, and won. But here's where the pressure starts to build. The world did not celebrate. A nation born from a slave revolt terrified every country that still owned slaves. The United States wouldn't recognize it. The European powers wouldn't trade with it. Haiti was alone, surrounded, treated like a sickness that might spread. And underneath all of it sat one cold, constant dread, that France would come back. That one morning the ships would appear on the horizon, the soldiers would land, and everything they had bled for would be undone. Every chain back on. For 20 years that fear never left. And then, in July of 1825, the ships came. A French squadron, 14 warships, more than 500 cannons, anchored off the capital, Port-au-Prince. Aboard was a baron carrying a document signed by the King of France. It was not a declaration of war. It was worse. It was an offer.
France would finally recognize Haiti as a real country. France would call off the threat of invasion. The dread of 20 years, gone in a single stroke. There was just one condition. Haiti had to pay. 150 million francs. Pay it to who? To the former slave owners. The very men who had whipped them, chained them, and sold them were to be paid back for their lost property. And that property was the Haitian people themselves. They were ordered to compensate their old masters for the crime of having freed themselves. And the number was monstrous. 150 million francs was roughly twice what the United States had just paid France for the entire Louisiana Territory, 800,000 square miles of North America. Haiti, one small nation, was billed twice that, for nothing you could touch at all, for a piece of paper that simply said they were allowed to exist. So picture the choice you're facing. The guns are in your harbor. Say no, and the army you've dreaded for 20 years may finally land. Say yes, and you mortgage your country's future to the people who once owned you. There was no good answer. On the 11th of July, 1825, Haiti signed. But they didn't even have the first payment. So to pay France, they borrowed from French banks. Loans, with interest, just to pay a ransom to France. A debt to pay off a debt. They called it the double debt, and the trap had closed. Now watch what that one signature did over time. This wasn't a bill you pay once and move on from. For generations, a huge share of everything Haiti earned, its taxes, its harvests, its income, was loaded onto ships and sent back across the ocean to France and to French bankers. Money that could have built schools went to the debt. Money for hospitals, for roads, for clean water, the debt. A country that should have been building itself was instead bleeding itself dry,
year after year, to pay for a freedom it had already won in blood.
So how long did it last? Not 10 years, not 50. The final payment on that debt was not made until 1947. Sit with that for a moment. The grandchildren of the people who signed in 1825 were still paying it, and their grandchildren after them. For 122 years, the ransom drained the nation, through wars, through famines, through everything, and it never once let go. And this is the part almost no one ever learns. When you hear that Haiti is poor, you might quietly assume it was always that way, that some places just are. But it wasn't always that way. This was the richest colony in the Americas. Its poverty was not bad luck. It was built, manufactured, one payment at a time. An investigation by the New York Times estimated the ransom cost Haiti at least $21 billion in lost growth, and by some measures, far, far more. An entire country's future taken in installments. In 2025, 200 years to the day after the warships came, the President of France finally stood up and admitted out loud what had been done. But the money has never come back. Haiti didn't lose its freedom that day in 1825. It won that, fair, on the battlefield. What it lost was everything that was supposed to come after. The chains came off in 1804. The bill for them took 122 years to pay.